Let's not get it twisted for the Longhorns. The reason they're down there at 17, it's not the loss at Ohio State or the loss at Georgia, no matter how ugly the fourth quarter was. It's the loss at Florida.
Yes.
And we've said that to you for a month and a half now here on this show. The Florida game's the one. If you had beaten and handled your business in Gainesville against a below average and now fired their coach Florida team, you'd be sitting right where you want to be at 8-2 in the top 10 in the country. The Florida game is your Waterloo, and as ugly as Georgia was, and it's got that the third time in 13 months. And people are talking about, well, they shouldn't even played Ohio State. If they hadn't played Ohio State, they'd be a 2-loss team. Well, if you hadn't lost to Florida,
right,
a team that everybody's beating this year, you needed to handle that business. And we said that all year. I mean, gosh, all offseason, before you even played a game. And we knew what the mission was. You have 4 huge games. You've got to play at Ohio State, at Georgia, host A&M, and play Oklahoma. If you go 2-2 in those games, split them, and win the rest of your games that you're supposed to win, you're going to be in the playoff. Right? And that's still the fact. Because they still have a chance to split the A&M, the 4 we're talking about. They've lost the 2 against top 4 teams now at Ohio State and at Georgia. They shouldn't have lost the Florida game. If you don't lose the Florida game, you're still in control of your destiny with A&M and Arkansas to come. And you'd be in the playoff right now, in the top 10 in the country. That's why you're not. So I don't want that was obvious. And you don't take Ohio State off your schedule. Don't stop scheduling these tough non-con games. They're good for your program. They're good for your team. They're good for college football. Don't flip them.
Good for recruiting, too.
It's great for recruiting. And we'll get back to why this has been a tough recruiting year for the Longhorns. But let me get back to the Sark conversation of yesterday and Desmond Howard and the tennis ball and all that went on, right?
Yeah.
Well, let me start with this, because somebody said Sark's biggest failure this year has been, the offensive line, and they can't run the football.
Okay. And
just how bad is the Texas running game in 2025? Well, let's just say it's dreadful.
Yeah.
Especially against SEC and top competition. SEC rushing yard leaders in conference play. Leading program for rushing in the SEC in 2025 is the Missouri Tigers. 207 yards a game with Ahmad Hardy. Texas A&M is number 2 behind that really good offensive line, and Mike Elko's team, they're 205.3. Arkansas is also, watch out Texas, Arkansas is over 200 yards a game on the ground. Anthony Hill won't play this week for Texas. Keep that in mind. And then Georgia, Ole Miss, Vanderbilt, Tennessee, Auburn. Texas is not only dead last, 15th in the SEC, which has 16 teams, is South Carolina with Lenora Sellers and a terrible offensive line. They average, against SEC competition, 98 yards a game on the ground. LSU is right in front of them at 99. Okay, so 98 yards a game. Texas in SEC play, yards on the ground, I dare say it, 71.
I was going to say it's in the 70s.
71.
Brutal.
They're almost 30 yards behind South Carolina, who's 15th.
Who's won 1 conference game.
And then listen to Sark this week when pressed by our buddy C.J. Vogel over at the On Texas Football Channel of what's been up with the running game this year.
There's probably a combination of things. One, I felt like we were blocking well in the run game.
All right, so I'm going to cut him off there because he goes on to this, and this is where for folks who criticize Sark in his press conference and say he's in denial, this is where I would agree with you. Yesterday I defended Sark because I think he's going to protect his team and not end the season and start airing people out. But at the same time, he goes into this long-winded thing about why our run game has been bad this year. No, Coach, your run game hasn't been bad. It's been awful.
Atrocious.
Awful. And it is for you, that was the mission this offseason because they weren't great running the ball last year against good competition.
They weren't.
They were better. Like, Trey Wisner got cranking against A&M last year, but that defense fell apart in November for Mike Elko. They'll be better this year. They ran the ball against Oklahoma. They ran the ball, against, Clemson in the championship game. But, of course, Clemson then fired their defensive coordinator.
Right.
So your running game was much better last year, but it wasn't good enough against the best teams like Ohio State and Georgia. And your job was to fix that, right? And not only did you not, it's been a wholesale collapse of the run game. 71 yards a game. You're 16th out of 16, but you're 30 yards behind 15. That's a failure. That's where you can't. If you're Sark, you can't, because again, I will protect him for protecting his locker room and trying to keep his guys focused, and we'll wait to the end of the year. We talk about underachieving and disappointing and failures and that. But you have to address why the run game is that bad. You ran for a total of 23 yards against Georgia. Okay? And so as this season tumbles towards the failed one, and we'll stamp it with the proper adjective when the season is over. Because, look, even if they go 9-3, and I pushed back on you on this yesterday, but I'm doubling back on that. If you go 9-3, and your losses are at Ohio State, at Georgia, and at Florida, That's not by any stretch a terrible season. If you go 9-3, finish 15th in the poll or 14th in the poll, and outside of the playoff, that's not but is it a failure?
I said a C+ when it came to that. Which
I would still argue a little higher than that because those 3 losses. But it comes down. The F is the Florida game.
Right.
Back to that point.
That's the test you failed if we're thinking of it in that.
Yeah, the
matter.
Florida game off a bye week when
Right.
they were coming off back-to-back losses. I mean, that's embarrassing. That's the failure. But the other rest of it's pretty solid because if you finish 9-3, you're going to have 3 top 10 wins. No one's done that since 2019. So you can't call that a terrible season or a C+ season. I would call that a B. But the Florida game sticks out as just a stub toe that was just unacceptable. Because, here's where you get into semantics. Because what was the mission? The mission was to improve on back-to-back Final Fours. So if you don't even make the playoffs, then it's a failed season. You failed the mission. But is it a failure of a season? You guys can all decide that. But that was the stated goal. And they're not going to achieve that mission. So not accomplished, whatever you think. And we'll put the proper adjective on it when it's all over. It could be 7-5, and we'll say miserable F for everybody.
8-4, 7-5, or 9-3.
We'll talk about later why that's so important for recruiting. But you got to keep some momentum in this program. 9-3. Beating wins over top 10 teams with losses on the road. And as I said earlier, if you rank the top 10 toughest places to play on the road in college football, there would be 3 of them. Ohio State, Florida, and Georgia.
Sure.
That's not a complete failure of a season. 9-3 with 3 top 10 wins and then those 3 losses. In this day and age, it's not going to make the playoffs, so it will be judged as a failure by a lot of people. That's not a terrible season. And Sark can be proud of that, or at least some level. The players can say, okay, we're building. We still have momentum in the recruiting trail. But I'm going to say this. And let's have a conversation about Sark that's not out of anger and emotion, but really just about reality. And I believe this. Not only did Sark and his family have a difficult and distracting offseason, but let's keep this in mind. His personal life is his personal life, and we'll keep it there. But there's a lot going on for Sark. And he's had issues in his personal life before. But let's go bring that out of that. Leave that to Sark and his family. Sark is also simultaneously this team's head coach, general manager, and he's the team's offensive coordinator.
Right.
I know Brandon Harris by title is the GM, but we know Sark is heavily involved, and he's the de facto, roster builder with the final say in decision making. So simultaneously, he's running 3 jobs. And in this year, and the results into year 5 would clearly tell you that he's failed in all 3 capacities. The law, and it leads right back to something pretty obvious. The law of diminishing returns is in effect here. And for a reminder, there is a law that states as you increase one input in the production process while keeping other inputs constant, the additional output produced will eventually decrease. That's the law.
Yeah.
Stated law of diminishing returns. As you increase input into the production process while keeping other inputs constant, the additional output from all 3 essentially will eventually decrease. Simply stated, you can't do it all yourself, Sark. You can't. Or even try. And he's trying. And while he's got all this stuff going on off the field. So as the pseudo GM, and guess what? He's failed at all 3 because of the diminishing returns. The roster, the team itself, the offense, they're all producing diminishing returns. And I think there's a basic law that tells you in the premise why. And this is not angry at Sark. This is just a reality at Sark. And this is, if I'm Chris Del Conte, his boss, and the people above him, this is what I would be telling him. Hey, listen, here's the fact, man. We go 9-3 even. Let's say we go 9-3. Beat A&M, 3 top 10 wins. That's great, bro. But you lost to Florida. And you didn't win one of these big road games you had to. We didn't even make the tournament.
You're going to the Citrus Bowl.
But let's be even more finite on that. As the OC, offensive coordinator, one of his 3 roles, he's overseen an offense that can't run the ball, as we just established. It struggles also to consistently protect the passer. And then his offense this year, when they do pass the ball and it's delivered, whether it's completed or not, might be inaccurate, might be dropped. But it's inconsistent to say the least. Wonky and not precise. There's been precise moments, but in total, the Georgia game was an example. You thought you fixed it after Vanderbilt.
Right.
When Arch played his best game, it was still spotty at best. As a head coach, well, let me go back to the general manager side. I mean, as a general manager, he's built a roster that largely is mediocre, especially on offense. The defensive side is great, but he's the architect of an offense that, doesn't have a great offensive line, doesn't have an elite running back. Trey Wisner's a good player. C.J. Baxter has not recovered from the injury. I was watching Lane Kiffin yesterday, and we'll talk about Lane coming up on Pat McAfee. He's got this star running back that he brought in through the portal who leads the nation in touchdowns, Kejuan Lacey. So that guy was available. I mean, so as the general manager and the architect, The high school recruiting seems strong. It was the number one recruiting class in the country, but what about the portal additions on the O-line? And in addition to being the general manager and adding portal players, you have to be able to evaluate the current players.
Right.
Okay, is this pancake factory of guys about to produce? Do you have a starting caliber left guard? Do you have a starting caliber player? If you don't, go get one.
Yeah, just because they're your guys, you brought them in and recruited them doesn't mean they're always going to be
And you're
developed
paying
and ready.
them, by the way.
You're paying them a lot of cash.
You're the general manager. So, again, the general manager, there's where you start putting, that's a C. The roster is really good on defense, even though the secondary hadn't been as good this year with no Jade Barron, no Andrew Makuba, and those kind of players. But same time, as the offensive coordinator, he's gotten a C minus to actually F's an offense. Offense an F this year. General manager, give him a C. Offense F. Because as we just said, they don't run the ball at all. They don't consistently protect the passer. And they don't complete passes at an elite level. So you don't do any part of your offense very well. You're the offensive coordinator. And then as a head coach, heck, his offense struggles to pick up first downs against good teams, right? I mean, extend drives. The red zone continues to be a problem outside of the Vanderbilt game. So, and then as a head coach, his third role in the law of diminishing returns, he has a team that is 135th in penalty yards or penalties per game, mistake prone, up and down, box of chocolates, incapable of complementary football, like they were last year in a lot of cases. And let me just say it this way, in the A block brought to you by Apple Leasing, Steve Sarkisian is not bad at coaching football. But I believe he's trying to do way too much. I mean, people have talked about the offense and the offensive coordinator and just the head coach. Well, he's also the general manager.
Right.
Put that, I mean, as the NFL creeps more and more like the college football ranks creep more and more into NFL style, you know, you see people, general managers who also are the head coaches. Well, the general manager gets the head coach fired all too often because they make bad draft picks and they make bad evaluations. And then the head coach, who's the same person, has to deal with it, right? We see that all the time. Well, this is where Sark is, in my opinion. And along with the family and personal dynamics, which we wouldn't get into, the solution's pretty obvious because we have these debates. You want to have a solution. Well, bring in what did OU do this offseason after a 6-7 year a year ago? They went and got Jim Nagy to be their general manager away from the Senior Bowl, and we got to know Jim pretty well with our trips to the Senior Bowl. Well, he makes the NIL decisions. He judges the roster. He's in charge of the with Brett Venables' assistants, but he's the man in charge. And then bring in a top-level offensive coordinator that calls plays and ideally even runs his own system. Right? And the question becomes for Sark, if you're having these meetings post the season when it's all said and done, and at this point, even if it's 9-3, it's going to be mission not accomplished. Well, is Sark willing to be a leader that delegates and a leader that doesn't want to micromanage every aspect of the program? Will his ego allow him to go there? And yes, he was hired to be the offensive coordinator. He's a great play caller. Then go somewhere and be an offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
You're the head coach of a major program and a blue blood that's got a huge budget. You need to be the leader that delegates and leads from a macro perspective. Is there any hope of this happening? I don't know. And I don't wonder if that's where some of the NFL rumors are coming. Some of the pressure that's being brought down, because don't think I'm the only person saying this to Sark, and it's trying to push CDC to say it to Sark. And maybe that's where some of this NFL stuff comes. Is he pushing back on the boosters because he doesn't want to relent power? Look, I mean, power corrupts, right? To have full power, it's corrosive to everything, in my opinion, and he has full power. And he's done a great job, and it's up to this point. But at this point, this is when good leaders pivot and look back and look inward. And Sark talks about that all the time.
Right.
Culture and mirrors and man in the mirror moments and those kind of things. Well, this is what I see. I see a guy who's trying to do
too much,
to wear 3 huge hats, 3 full-time jobs,
right,
at the same time, and compete against Kirby Smart and Kalen DeBoer and
Ryan
Brett
Day.
Venables, who now has a general manager to take that off his plate, and he's back to running the defense. I mean, that's the examples are out there, and Sark right now it appears to be unwilling to be that guy, or maybe he is. Maybe he just wants to get to the end of this year, not shake things up, not panic, and maybe there is a conversation. So I don't know what the outcome is, but to me, that's a remedy, because I think Steve Sarkisian should be running this program and be the top of this program. He's shown he knows how to coach ball. He knows how to lead people. He knows how to build culture. He knows how to identify talent, like Kirby Smart does, like Ryan Day does, like those guys. But at the same time, they're not trying to wear all those hats.
No. Too many hats to wear.
And it's not to suggest that Sark can't have a say in all 3 of them. Yes,
right,
but the first and foremost thing, he has to be the head coach of the football team.
That's the most important thing. That's the most important hat to wear.
And then you can have
you're hired for.
You can hire the offensive coordinator and have say with that guy. So find somebody, you get to hire him. Bring in someone you're going to be conducive
Yeah.
with, someone you're going to be aligned with, someone you can work with, or promote A.J. Milwee if you like him so much at quarterbacks coach. But let them handle that. That's a full-time job in the SEC. And then consider, and this is not a knock at Brandon Harris, their young general manager, but would it be wrong to think of an outside general manager who's got NFL caliber experience to come in, because they've got the pocketbook to do that.
Yeah.
Bring in someone who's done it at that level, like Jim Nagy. And I'm not saying who or what you have to hire, but the law of diminishing returns would tell you that this is the main problem and culprit with Texas right now, and it's too many jobs and too many hats for one person to wear, and it's showing up on the football field, in my opinion, on Saturdays with Sark. And again, you add the layer of the personal stuff, that's just too much for any person, for crying out loud.